Alright, I only have 2 hours to make a video and upload it, so I'm gonna get this one rolling. Boy, Chris, that old footage brings back memories. And it really makes me think about the good old days when it was you and me and Steve with that camera and Steve. Holy crap, I just remembered, it's Fiction Friday. Videobloggery. You may remember that some time ago I began a story called The Harrowing Journey of Jean-Pierre Willoughby. And you can see part 1 by clicking on my mug. But even if you haven't seen this still won't be that difficult to follow. So here we go with The Harrowing Journey of Jean-Pierre Willoughby Jr. Part 2, Chapter 2, The Nawo. In another time, Jean-Pierre Willoughby Jr. stood high atop a pyramid, gazing past the surrounding ruins and into the expanse of foliage that constitutes the rainforest of Mesoamerica. JP, Jean-Pierre heard from far below. His fellow student, Mary Everett, stood there, hands cupped around her mouth in a makeshift megaphone. You made it to the top. Super. Happy now? Actually, yeah. Wonderful. Now get down here. We're about to go in. Jean-Pierre began to clamber down, using the same handholds that had allowed him up. Indeed, he was happy. It was highly unusual for the professor to allow cultural anthropology students to accompany his archaeology trips. Jean-Pierre thanked his lucky stars, in particular, May, the luckiest of his stars. As Jean-Pierre's feet made contact with the soil, May chided him. Come on, they're already inside. Jean-Pierre grinned, as was still his custom in those days. Excellent. Let's say we take our time catching up. He moved to place his arm around her, but she rebuffed him. None of that, Jean-Pierre. Dad sees that arm doing anything funny, and he'll take it. Then why'd you even bother convincing him to let me come in the first place? He pouted as the two of them entered the massive stone structure. Because you wanted to come. So far as he's concerned, you and I are just classmates. That's how it has to be. For now. Jean-Pierre frowned, but he knew she was right. Jean-Pierre had expected the interior of the pyramid to be dark and dank, untouched for centuries. This was not entirely so. The pyramid had been excavated years ago. Electric lights were rigged along the sides of the stone walls, and the stone floor had been kept surprisingly neat. This expedition was far from the first to enter the pyramid. But despite the clear modern presence, it was still a thing of majesty. It was Jean-Pierre's first ancient landmark, and the knowledge that he was standing in a place that belonged to another people, in another time, left him simultaneously in awe of them and with a feeling that he had somehow violated the sanctity of their only legacy. Jean-Pierre glanced at May for a moment and was shaken to see how unaffected she was. This was certainly not her first ancient landmark. I think they're not far ahead, she mentioned. Indeed, the voices of their fellow students echoed faintly down the corridor. May's father, Professor Charles Everett, had taken 5 students with him on this expedition, and the other 3 were already assembled at the end of the corridor. Good, we're all present, the professor said as soon as he had spotted them. Now I want to talk to you all about why we took some time to come to this site. I was wondering, said Neil, one of the other students. It looks as though this place has already been excavated. So it has, Professor Everett said, and when we get back to our site, we'll do some actual work. I just wanted you all to see this site, as it's one of the most interesting in the region, and it may yet contain undiscovered information about the Nawo culture. Jean-Pierre's eyebrows raised at this statement. May was puzzled. Nawo? I thought this was a Mayan pyramid. Mr. Willoughby, perhaps you can explain, said the professor, seeing Jean-Pierre's intrigued expression. Me? Oh, sure. The Nawo were one of those weird mysteries that historians don't really know much about. Because so much Mayan writing still exists, we have a lot of references to them from the Mayan culture, but they also appear in records of other early civilizations all over the Americas. Nomads, the professor agreed, and fast ones if the record is any indication. It seems they moved from Canada to Mesoamerica over the course of 30 years, and then back to Canada within a century after that. They even encountered Spanish settlers in Florida as late as the 16th century. And what does this pyramid have to do with the Nawo? Jean-Pierre replied. Well, Professor Everett said, Mayan records about the Nawo point specifically toward a pyramid where several Nawo were buried. I believe that this may be that pyramid, based on information I have from my colleagues. I see, Jean-Pierre said. That's very strange, May pointed out. Why would the Mayans have used their own pyramid to bury the dead of the Nawo? It's even stranger than that, the professor said, cocking an eyebrow. They didn't bury the Nawo dead. Those Nawo were buried alive. Without any further discussion, Professor Everett motioned for the students to follow him through an archway, which they did in silence. And that is Chapter 2. In case you were confused and you didn't understand what was going on, it was a flashback. And I apologize that it wasn't as heavily produced as Chapter 1, but as I said, I am a little bit short on time. So I hope you enjoyed the story. I'd like to say more about the footage that Chris used in his last video. Well, actually, you know what? No, I don't want to say anything more about that. Perhaps it's better without context. So Chris, I'll see you in 3 days, and have a nice breakfast.